Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Cause you can, and you don't stop. Cause you can, and you don't stop. Oh, when you can, and you don't stop. I got the brand new guarantee like you.
Yes. It's that day of the week and that time of the night on Late Night Sports Radio. Welcome all. Welcome to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. I'm your host, Jim Saranteas of the FantasyGreek.com, and I am, as usual, joined by our producer from 87sportsfans.com, the lovely Keith Grieve. Keith, how are you?
There you go with that lovely again. And I'd like to hijack the first part of this broadcast with an announcement. I know I will be disappointing a lot of people, but I will not be throwing at the combine.
Oh, come on, man. Don't listen to your agent.
Sorry.
Don't throw the football into meaningless exercise. Come on.
I got to look out for me and mine.
Wait, you broke up on me. Look out for you and your what?
I got to look out for me and mine.
Oh, I got you. Well, you usually do, Keith, but, it doesn't really matter for our purposes tonight, because tonight we've got a special guest here on the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. In the first half of the show, we'll be talking exclusively about the Colts with Colts writer George Bremer of the Herald Bulletin. Then in the second half of the show, Keith, we'll talk exclusively about the Buccaneers with the big tickets, Patrick Beaulieu, and time allowing, we'll continue with our Keep 'em or Cut 'em segment on free agency. And just a reminder to all our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to give us a call at 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. Or tweet the Greek at hashtag AskTFG. That's hashtag AskTFG. And remember, there is no such thing as a stupid question on this show. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest, George Bremer. George is a sports editor for the Herald Bulletin in Anderson, Indiana, member of the Pro Football Writers Association, and co-host of Colts Central Radio. You can follow him on Twitter at GM Bremer. That's at GM Bremer. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
George, it's our pleasure. We are absolutely so lucky to have you, as you're a writer that exclusively covers the Indiana Colts there in Indiana, and when you follow a team exclusively, you get to build a certain reputation and expertise as to that team. So that said, I want to start off by sort of saying, look, we had the 2014 Colts. They finished 11-5 and made it to the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, where they lost, unfortunately, 45-7. In your view, what was this 2014 Colts team missing?
Toughness. I think it was one of the first things that Jim Irsay said up in Foxborough after the game. This team needs to get tougher. I think they had, of the 5 offensive line positions, Anthony Costanzo started at left tackle all 16 games. The other 4 spots, there were 3 different starters at each of those spots, and that's just incredible to even think about that. I don't know that any other team comes close to that kind of a turnover on the offensive line. They need to get some consistency up there, clearly. I think they have an answer at left guard with the rookie Jack Mewhort. When he was out, it was because of a knee injury. But when he was able to play this year, he did a solid job. I think he helped there. But really, center, right guard, and even to some extent right tackle. Gosler Chairless in 2013 was one of the more consistent linemen they had. But last season, he was dealing with an assortment of injuries. I think he had a shoulder injury at some point. He had a groin injury, had some knee injuries. He maybe even had an ankle at some point, and it showed. He struggled quite a bit. If he can't get back to where he was, they don't really have a lot of other answers right now behind him. Joe Wrights did a good job at the end of the year, ended up starting all 3 playoff games, but he's an unrestricted free agent. Don't know yet whether he'll be back. And then when you look on the defensive side of the ball, it's really the same story. A defensive line, the front 7 in general, twice this year, the Patriots were just able to run over them at will. When you can do that, it opens up so much for the rest of the offense. And you could just see New England had so much confidence, and they were really stressed on any down.
You threw a lot at us there, George, and I sort of want to try and break this down a little bit. And let's start off with, I suppose, the one Colt that all of us love, and that's Andrew Luck. He seemed to carry this team offensively from week one all the way through to the AFC Championship game. On the season, he threw the football 616 times. It was just amazing. 380 completions for 4,761 yards and 40 TDs. Now, while he was sacked just 29 times, he was hit 107 times, placing him 8th in terms of, and this is our own metric that we use here at the Fantasy Greek, quarterback smacks. 8th at quarterback smacks. Given the team's defensive struggles, which you've mentioned a bit there, what do you think is on Andrew Luck's wish list for 2015 in terms of player personnel?
I think it's got to start up front for him. You talk about the number of times he's been hit, and that wasn't unusual for him so far in his 3-year career, unfortunately, for his well-being and state of mind. He actually probably, the sack total went down quite a bit, and I think probably the hit total was at least didn't go up. So I think really protection, that's where it really needs to start. You see everything that he's done and how miraculous he's been at times, and you really wonder how good this kid could be if he had, good time to throw the football, to actually read a defense and stay back there and, give routes time to develop and let a play kind of play out. It'll be interesting to see how much emphasis there is on the offensive line. I know, like center in particular, Ryan Grigson has been sort of, I don't want to say leery, but he doesn't really want to spend a high round draft choice on that position. So, that's probably a third round or lower look for him. I don't know that there's a lot in free agency that wasn't there last year. So I don't know how much they're going to look at that. At left guard or right guard, they brought in Ben Heenan, who was a former number 1 overall pick in the CFL. He's an interesting prospect, but obviously that's not somebody you just plug and play. And then I mentioned Gosler Chairless and the issues at right tackle. So I really think maybe a guy like La'el Collins from LSU may be available at number 29. He's somebody who could play outside if they need him to, could start his career inside. That might be something that they'll look at. That might be somebody who would be high up on Andrew Luck's wish list.
It's interesting. I look at their depth chart and sort of how the free agents fall. And even if you could sit there and make some criticisms of the offensive line or the defensive line, which you could based on some of the numbers that we've got, the reality is there aren't any free agents there except for Corey Redding. And
Go ahead.
Oh no, and that having been said, I mean, it looks like if they're going to make a move, it would have to be for a splash player, at least along the lines, with the exception of defensive end.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Corey Redding's an interesting case as well. He was brought in, obviously, with Chuck Pagano to kind of bring that defense, help bring it along as quickly as possible from Baltimore, and really one of the better signings that Ryan Grigson's had so far in Indianapolis. But there was talk even last year that he considered retirement. So you wonder, not just with him being a free agent, but, is he even interested in coming back for another year? And if he doesn't, that's a really big loss to this defense. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. I know there's been some talk down here about, could they be interested in Ndamukong Suh if he comes available. Today, Detroit kind of hinted that that's not going to happen, that they're optimistic they are going to get a deal done with him. And I think the other name to kind of keep an eye on, just because obviously of Chuck Pagano's familiarity with him, is Haloti Ngata. We'll see how things play out in Baltimore, but there's been some suggestion that maybe he's going to be asked to take a pay cut and could possibly be a cap casualty there.
That'd be interesting. That'd be really interesting. Certainly, it would improve. I mean, just for people to hear that, it seems to make the defense better. So outside of Ndamukong Suh, Haloti Ngata, do you think there's anybody else that sort of the Colts are looking at in free agency?
I think the whole league would be interested in Jason Pierre-Paul if he would pop out of New York, but I think the Giants are going to do everything they can. There's even some talk of maybe a franchise tag, it sounds like, there. But he was able to bounce back last year with another JPP-type season. I think that's somebody fits a lot of what they would want to do. But, aside from that, I don't know that there's really a lot of names out there. Maybe you take a look at Nick Fairley if Sue falls through. But I don't know. He's had some disappointing time. He did play better this year, but what they really need is pass rush. They had a lot of sacks if you look at total this year, but Jonathan Newsom, the rookie, led them with 6.5. And yes, Robert Mathis hopefully will be back. They've kind of got their fingers crossed there, but he's 34 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. You don't know how much you can count on there. I think a pass rusher of any sort, from any position, should be near the top of the list.
And, I actually, when I was looking at the team's free agents, that would be at the top of my list, I think, would be a defensive end. If not a free agent, then certainly turn around and take a look at somebody in the draft. There's got to be at least 3 that are for certain first-rounders, maybe a 4th and a 5th that would actually fall pretty nicely right there at the back of the first round. Now, as we're moving along here, I wanted to actually talk about a few players that are either about to be free agents or who are fan favorites, by the way, as well as a few players that you just kind of sort of have to wonder whether it's time for the Colts to move on with them. And the first player I want to talk about is number one, a fan favorite, certainly a favorite of mine, Reggie Wayne. What do you see happening with him? Do you think the Colts move on?
It was interesting today. His agent, Amp Harris, got on Twitter or Instagram, one of those social media outlets, and said that he felt like Reggie was ready. He's back. He's recovered, and he's getting back towards 100%. And I think both sides would really like to get something done there. Reggie mentioned a couple times during the year that he wants to finish his career here in Indianapolis. I think he's very, very close to the receptions lead, and I think maybe yardage, where Marvin Harrison, of course, number one in both of those. But just with a mediocre season, Reggie Wayne can overtake him in both of those categories. And I think that would be something that would really mean a lot to him. I think the Colts will be open to it, but it's one of those things that it's got to be at the right price, and you have to kind of figure what that price is going to be. He obviously had the knee injury 2 years ago. This year he had elbow, tricep, and groin ailments. Clearly wasn't the same guy at the end of the year, and sort of similar to what Denver's doing with Peyton Manning. I think you have to sit back and make a decision about whether it was the injuries that made it look like he'd lost a step there at the end of the year, or if it's something further. And they've got a guy in Dante Moncrief I think they can feel comfortable with as a number 2 if they need to go that way. Maybe bring Reggie back in a little bit of a reduced role, but certainly something I think all the fans would like to see, and both sides would like to see it happen. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Another player that seemed to be a fan favorite, and he certainly has played well when he's been healthy, has been Vic Ballard. But unfortunately, Vic just can't seem to stay healthy, stay right. But he's still on the team. He's still under contract. Do the Colts stick it out with him?
Yeah, I think so, because he's still on that rookie deal, and so you really don't have a lot of risk involved with him as far as salary cap goes or roster space goes. But I remember when he got hurt, I think it was the first practice day this year of training camp, and he went to the cart, and no one had really seen what had happened amongst us in the media. It was really early in the practice. They were doing individual drills, and all of a sudden he's on the ground, and we later find out it was a passing drill, and he was obviously untouched. And just the look on his face and his teammates' face, because he had worked so hard to get back, and obviously as a rookie had flashed so many things that gave you encouragement for his future. But I think he's fortunate in any way. He's fortunate. It's that his contract is so low, so they can bring him back and kind of see what can happen. But I don't think he's somebody that they're obviously going to be able to rely on for a big role yet.
There's the running back position for the Colts has sort of been in flux, especially these last couple seasons. But a player who's breathed an air of refreshing air of energy into everything, but is also has a problem staying healthy, is Ahmad Bradshaw. I love Ahmad Bradshaw. I've loved him for many years. He's sort of a pit bull. He just gets in there and he runs with a purpose. How about him? I think he's actually a free agent. What do you think? The Colts give him another contract?
Yeah, he was a free agent last year as well, and I thought at that time